What's going on? My name is Joe Lewis, and I practice talking on the internet. And as usual, for all of these streams, it's brought to you by the good folks who support me on Patreon, which are Jane, Marking, Maru, Frackle, Liberation, Valentine, and Michael. And if you want to be part of the growing Patreon community, feel free to go to patreon.com/Joe Lewis with 2 O's. And that way you can show support in that capacity if that's something that interests you. I had an interesting conversation with a parent. So I want to sort of follow through with that conversation because they're kind of related. And it's just been something that's been on my mind since the other day. I think you need to, as a matter of your civic duty, to force your kids to play an instrument or do a sport. And you can't let them off the hook. I think one of the biggest problems one of many problems, but one that's pretty large that exists in the United States is that we have a culture of parenting that says if your child wants to quit something, then it's okay for them to quit. And I'm saying for these two things, that answer needs to be no until they're at least 18. I would go as far as to say when they're through college, but I'll take 18 for now. I think that sports and the arts in particular musical instruments and learning a musical instrument provides a lot of things that the education system does not allow for because of time and other constraints, and allows for opportunities that may only exist in their formative years during these activities. I think if we had to do a national poll, you would probably find that people who did sports and music probably traveled to more places during that time between the ages of K through 12. They probably had more opportunities in this age of K through 12. Like if and again, I'm really biased here because I played sports and did musical instruments, but I don't think it's unreasonable to believe that those children are more involved in what's in the outside world and have more opportunities because of that by virtue of them being in these ensembles or these teams. And something that I think is one of the most important things that learning a musical instrument or being in sport does, it teaches you a lot of things that education just doesn't compensate for, or not able to compensate for. So it teaches you about codependence, needing to interact with a group of people in a particular context and setting towards a particular goal. It teaches you time management. It teaches you personal responsibility and personal accountability for your actions in a way that the education system currently does not allow you to, or does not allow for. It teaches you time management. It teaches you pain management. It teaches you the question of how do you have all of these interweaving parts and codependent and like, let me rephrase this. Sorry, I got a little stun knocked there because something got in my eye. How do you have all of these moving parts and they all have and require a certain level of attention, but you only have a finite amount of time to do that or do them? So how do you manage your time in such a way where all these obligations are fulfilled? It teaches you a very important lesson about failure and dealing with failure outright, and not only dealing with failure as a matter of quote unquote getting over it, but also figuring it out. I think one of the hardest things that life teaches you is in the face of failure, you have to figure it out. And that's something that if you don't experience until you're in college, it's too late. It also teaches you in some ways in the lines of failure, inevitability. The existential dread that you did everything in your power and everything in your power wasn't good enough. That's something that I think sports and music teach you very, very clearly. And all these things that I mentioned, not only do they teach them to you and you deal with them early, you deal with them often. And I think that is something that parents can't let their kids quit from. Because I've seen time and time again, and like it's really enlightening now where I'm at the age where I have former students, and some of them have come to me and spoken to me after, because I see them because they're adults now. So I see them where it's like, oh, hey, Mr. Lewis. And like I had a student, like this is like, it kind of fucked with me a little bit, where I had a student who was really, really talented, and he quit. And then like I saw him playing a gig. I was like, what? So I was I like, we caught up, like we kind of chopped shop a little bit, and he said very frankly, like, one of the mistakes that I did was like stop going to lessons. And because I asked him like, well, what made you want to pick it back up? And then he was just like, I realized like I made a mistake. And lo and behold, he went and pursued music. And this was a kid who I had him when he first started, like fresh into the world. And then come freshman year of high school, he just stopped. And yeah, and then like, long story short, he ended up picking it back up in college because he just realized what he did was like dumb. and like he actually enjoyed the thing. And I think that, like, again, to make sure the thesis is clear, I think that parents can't let their kids off the hook when it comes to sports and music. I think you gotta force them through. And I think you'll be a better parent in the long run that way as well, because I think we need to have a quality of parenting that tells their kids no. And not a matter of no because I said so, a matter of no that there's actually like real world consequences to you wanting to say no and leaving this thing. Which again, music and sports allow for. Like, education doesn't really allow for that. Like, you can't like, oh, I'm going to drop this class. And it's like, well, think about your other teammates that are, or classmates that are counting on you. It doesn't matter in that context. But in sports, like, if you play a certain position and you want to quit, you're not only affecting their lives, but you're affecting the lives of potentially the lives of the entire program, a bunch of other parents, a bunch of other things. Like, there's so many moving parts when it comes to quitting these things that I think is important for young adults and kids to really understand. And I think most importantly, this is something that allows for me dropping things. This allows for being able to figure it out. And I think that's the biggest thing that sports and music teaches you, is to use your creative, your mind, your creative mind, and your talents in the world to figure it out. And that's something that's going to be important if you want to have any type of wholeness politically. It's any type of wholeness socially, having actual relationships of quality. Being able to figure it out is one of the things that music and sports teaches you at all times and in all areas. If you have a piece that you need to work on and you're expected to learn it by X date, figure it out. And it's not this avoidable thing where, like, education has this thing where there's mechanisms of getting by that are very, very powerful, and music and sports don't allow for that. I think it's so important, so incredibly important, that you are dealing in a space that doesn't allow you to do the shortcuts that you're able to do in education. Because there's some kids that think that's possible. Like, there's some kids that think that, oh, I can just, work on all my lesson material the day before the lesson. No, I'm going to call you out on it. And not only am I going to call you out on it, I'm going to embarrass you in your own lesson with me. And versus where, like, you could do the same thing of like cramming the day before, and then the teacher like, well, this is kind of underdeveloped, but hey, B. And it's like, no, that's not how that works in music. That's not how it works in sports either. Like, if you don't prepare for the game, you won't play. So, and then the consequence of that could be dire. Like your lack of preparedness in sports could lead to you being on the bench for 4 years. Or your preparedness could lead you to scholarship opportunities. It could lead you to school opportunities. A bunch of things can manifest itself from preparing yourself and figuring it out. And again, it's something that I don't think a public education currently really allows for in a way that's very like cultivating for children and young adults. Which is why I think parents can't let their kids quit. I want till college, but 18 is probably fine. But yeah, I think that the parents who forced their kids into playing a musical instrument in sports are going to be preparing their kids for a world that's a bit more realistic. And one side note about that is that I'm not talking about, I'm going to like teach my kid to play violin and then I'm only going to have them do violin by themselves until they're 18. No. You not only have to make sure that they have a private instructor or what have you, but also being in the ensembles that this instrument exists in and making them do it. So if there's a pit orchestra in your high school and they need string players, you're the first one to sign up. And it's not a negotiation. It's not a conversation. It's not a dialogue. It's, the musical's coming up. You're in the pit. Oh, it's the graduation for X class. You're in that band. Oh, there's marching band there's marching band. You're doing marching band. Not only are you doing marching band, but you're also doing orchestra and you're also doing concert band. Like you're doing all of the things that this activity encapsulates itself in. So for instance, like if you're a football player and you're playing football, you're probably also doing track. If you're playing basketball, you're also probably doing whether it be football or track and field. Like you're doing all of the activities that interact around learning X or Y thing. And I think it's going to make for better off kids. It's going to make for better off young adults, which is going to make for just better off people in a world where we have to be codependent with one another. We have to be accountable for each other's actions. I hate using this word, but in some situations we got to compete. And these two things, learning a musical instrument or being in a sport, are two things I think parents can't let their kids off the hook for. Yeah. And that's the blurb. Let me know what you think about that. And let me know if you were one of those those survivors of the thing. Meaning like, or you somebody who had your parents force you through going into music or force you through going through sports? And again, like there are pitfalls to that, right? Like there are, like, we can have maybe a separate conversation. I might stream about this later. By the time you see this, might be in the past, but maybe there's a lot more nuance to that. Like, what do we do with helicopter parenting that exists within these two activities? How do we navigate income inequality? How do we properly and equitably accommodate for individuals? There's a lot of other nuance that exists in there, but that's like deeper nuance that these videos aren't really designed for. But they are designed for in like further conversation. So if you want to have like a further conversation about this by the time you see this and you see me streaming on Twitch at twitch.tv/Joe Lewis with 2 O's, then feel free to come through and we can chop shop and navigate the little discourse. But in short, don't make your kids quit. Your kids are not allowed to quit these things. And those two things are learning a musical instrument or being in a sport. With that being said, I see a lot of people on spring break and starting it. So I hope you have a good spring break. And depending on the video schedule, happy Easter if you see this. And yeah, I'll see you soon.